Young mum warns of rock fishing dangers after losing husband and son. Hasty Masumi lost her husband and son while rock fishing at Little Bay, Sydney, in January 2022. She is now calling for more warnings about the dangers of rock fishing. Research from the University of Melbourne shows that fatalities often occur when the surf appears calm. Rock fishing has been identified in the Australian Water Safety Strategy 2030 as a priority area for reducing drowning death toll. Life jackets are compulsory in Western Australia and New South Wales, while a trial is underway in Victoria. Randwick Council, which takes in Little Bay, is reviewing whether to provide a council-funded lifeguard service. Previously secret Treasury documents expose homebuilder concerns. Newly released reports have shown that the Morrison government's $2.3 billion homebuilder scheme was plagued by a lack of governance, controls and risk management. The scheme, which provided grants of up to $25,000 for homeowners to build or renovate their homes, was designed to support the construction sector during the COVID-19 pandemic. However, the reports found that the scheme overheated the construction sector, leading to increased costs for building and renovating homes. The reports, accessed through Freedom of Information, also revealed a lack of appropriate record keeping and reporting. Link. Title: ******* Queensland scientists test cloud brightening theory to tackle climate change. Queensland scientists have found a practical way to test the cloud brightening theory, which aims to limit the effects of global warming. The team from Southern Cross University's Reefs and Oceans Research Cluster has been shooting seawater from cannons to brighten clouds for over 3 years in a bid to cool down the Great Barrier Reef and protect the coral from bleaching. The sea spray adds more particles to the air for clouds to form upon, creating a thicker cloud made up of smaller water particles that reflect more sunlight, protecting whatever is below it. The scientists will present their findings at the International Conference on Nucleation and Atmospheric Aerosols in Brisbane. Hashtags, A Queensland nurse awarded $1.6 million in damages after suffering injury at work. A Queensland nurse has been awarded $1.6 million in damages after successfully suing the Gold Coast Hospital and Health Service. Trinette Ruth Wilson, 46, suffered a debilitating hip injury in 2016 when she twisted away from a patient who was thrashing in a bed at Robina Hospital. Ms. Wilson's injury is severe and has resulted in chronic pain, preventing her from working. She received a disability support pension and a family tax benefit. Queensland Supreme Court Justice Soraya Ryan found the health service negligent and that Ms. Wilson should have been better trained. The court broke down the damages to include costs including past economic loss, future economic loss, and non-economic loss. Canberra's population and economy are booming, but it's not all good news. Canberra is thriving, with its economy and population growing at a rapid pace. The ACT government has tabled its latest budget, which shows a marked improvement in its balance sheet. However, with the population boom comes pressure on public services and housing affordability. The government is withholding details on where new housing will be built until later this year, and housing remains Australia's second most expensive in the city. While the budget offers some protection against economic hardships, the question remains whether enough dwellings will be built to accommodate the Act's fast-growing population. DV victims left waiting for hours by stretched police force, inquest hears. A senior Northern Territory police dispatcher broke down in the witness box, telling the NT coroner, "All we do for 12 hours is prioritise," as the incessant pressure on emergency call takers was laid bare at a coronial inquest. Dispatch Sergeant Wolfgang Langeneck explained to the coroner the stress that call takers and dispatchers at the Joint Emergency Services Control Centre were under during every shift, painting a picture of a stretched police force that is leaving domestic violence victims waiting for hours. This inquest is one of 4 being examined by the coroner as part of a series of investigations into domestic violence in the Northern Territory. Title: Cave divers look to explore new Mount Gambier sinkhole. Cave divers in Mount Gambier are eager to explore a new sinkhole that appeared after heavy rain on Sunday morning. The sinkhole, which is 2 meters in width and depth, is believed to be connected to other underground passages in the city. Cave diver Josh Richards and his companion discovered an extension of the Engelbrecht Cave in Mount Gambier 2 years ago. The passage heads towards but does not quite reach the Cave Garden Sinkhole Park in Mount Gambier's center. The new sinkhole is in a direct line with the new section, leading cave divers to believe they could be connected. Hashtags. Residents divided after Western Sydney Airport proposed flight paths released. The preliminary flight paths for the new Western Sydney International Airport have been released, causing concern for residents in the Blue Mountains and Blacktown areas. The flight noise tool allows residents to check how many planes will fly over their property and the intensity of the noise. While some expressed concern over the noise, others see the new airport as a significant opportunity that will bring new jobs and investments to the area. The airport is expected to operate 24 hours a day and is set to handle 10 million passengers annually by 2030. A public consultation meeting is expected to take place soon. Canberra's 2023-24 budget aims to ease financial burden on local households. Description: the recently released ACT budget for 2023-24 aims to provide relief to Canberra households feeling the pinch of rising interest rates and increased living costs. The government is investing $50 million in early childhood education, offering 1 day of free preschool per week for all 3-year-olds. Additionally, $230 million will be spent on schools and education facilities, including planning 4 new schools. The budget also includes an increase in household rates of only 3.75%, well below inflation and the lowest in a decade. Such measures are expected to ease the financial burden on households across Canberra. Hashtags. Review finds significant institutional failure by ICAC in renewal SA investigation. The Independent Commission Against Corruption (ICAC) of South Australia substantially mismanaged parts of its inquiries into former Renewal SA boss John Hanlon's travels, a review finds. However, the report said there was sufficient evidence to justify investigating Hanlon's interstate and international trips. Hanlon was first charged with abuse of public office in 2020 and was alleged to have claimed expenses for a trip to Berlin in 2017 to see his grandchild being born while not conducting official work for Renewal SA. The charges have been dropped twice, and Hanlon has maintained his innocence throughout. The review led to calls for a royal commission. Flood-affected community in fear as buyback scheme for damaged homes in New South Wales under scrutiny. The number of flood-damaged homes in New South Wales Northern Rivers eligible for a buyback is in question, leaving residents in fear. The New South Wales Reconstruction Authority head, Simon Draper, seemed to backtrack on a promise that 2,000 homes would be eligible for a voluntary buyback, while another 4,000 would be eligible for retrofitting or house raising. Mr. Draper said the estimated cost of buying back 2,000 homes in a high-risk area almost doubled what had been pledged. Lismore Mayor Steve Krieg described the situation as confusing and distressing. The situation has caused a backlash from affected communities. SA High School criticised for inadequate response to alleged sexual assault. A South Australian high school has been criticised for failing to provide adequate support to a student who was allegedly sexually assaulted by 2 schoolmates in 2021. The state's ombudsman, Wayne Lyons, found that the school did not offer the victim counselling for nearly a month after the allegations were made, despite significant escalation by complainants. The student has since left the school, while the alleged offenders were excluded. Lyons called for the Department for Education to revise its procedures around exclusionary discipline and counselling in response to critical incidents of a sexual nature. The department has accepted all 6 of his recommendations. Water birds dying in oil spill south of Perth as authorities probe cause. Authorities are investigating an engine oil spill in Perth's southern waterways that is killing and harming birds. Pelicans are the most impacted species, with at least 10 birds found dead and dozens more rescued for treatment. The Department of Water and Environmental Regulation (DWER) is yet to identify the source of the spill, but sample testing suggests it is engine oil. DWER has been working with several groups, including councils and environmental officers, to assist in locating the source of the oil. If a commercial enterprise is identified as responsible, they could face penalties of up to $500,000. Domino effect in cost of living increases hit already struggling customers. Residents and business owners in Tasmania are struggling to keep up with the cost of living as councils increase their rates to balance their books. The fast-approaching new financial year will bring more pain, with power bills for small businesses and households increasing by 9.51% from July, and businesses and homeowners facing higher rates. Glenorchy City Council will raise rates by 8.95% as it tries to soften the blow of a forecast $3.64 million deficit next financial year. Unfortunately, this will be felt by small business owners and residents alike, as costs continue to rise. UN investigator calls for closure of Guantanamo Bay and apology to detainees. Our UN investigator has called for the closure of the Guantanamo Bay Detention Center and an apology to detainees. Law professor Fionnuala Ni Aolane said that 30 men held at the center were subject to ongoing cruel, inhuman and degrading treatment under international law. Ni Aolane praised the Biden administration for leading by example and giving her access to everything requested. However, she expressed grave concerns for those who remained, noting that many detainees showed signs of deep psychological harm and distress. She also cited fundamental fair trial and due process deficiencies in the military commission system. Investigation into fatal helicopter crash involving Crocodile Wrangler sparks criminal probe. Australia's national aviation watchdog, the Australian Transport Safety Bureau (ATSB), has referred possible criminal offences to the Australian Federal Police over a no-blame safety investigation into the fatal helicopter crash that killed Chris Willow Wilson, a cast member of Netflix's Outback Wrangler. The ATSB did not disclose the nature of the possible offences, nor who they might relate to. In November, celebrity crocodile wrangler, Matt Wright, owner of the helicopter, was charged with several wrongdoing offences, including attempting to pervert the course of justice. The ATSB's final report is expected to be published by September. Special Investigative Office probing Lawyer X scandal to be shut down with no charges laid. The Office of the Special Investigator (OSI), set up to investigate possible criminal charges against those involved in the Lawyer X scandal, will be shut down without anyone being charged. The recruitment of barrister Nicola Gobbo as a police informant triggered one of the biggest scandals in the history of Victoria Police. Former High Court Justice Geoffrey Nettle, who was appointed to lead the OSI, called for his own office to be disbanded after his attempts to bring charges against a group of people, including police, were rejected by the Director of Public Prosecutions. The shutdown has been criticised by the Victorian opposition. PwC conceals interest in private education provider during review of regulator. PwC's failure to disclose a $5.5 million interest in Top Education Group during a confidential review of the Commonwealth Regulator of Private Colleges has been called completely unacceptable by the Australian Education Minister. The firm has previously been found to have concealed its interest in the provider from the government. The news comes after a group of PwC employees challenged the firm's leadership, demanding further reform than the proposed sale of its government consulting arm. The 8 signatories accused the firm of misconduct, including covering up harassment or assault. PwC has admitted its failure to disclose its interest in Top Education Group. WA households get extra power bill credit as Synergy agrees to pay $30 million fine. Households in Western Australia will receive an additional $28 off their electricity bills after Synergy, the state's largest power retailer, agreed to pay a $30 million fine for unlawfully overcharging some industrial customers. The Economic Regulation Authority claimed that Synergy artificially inflated prices more than 11,000 times between 2016 and 2017, which resulted in the power provider's revenues growing between $40 million and $102 million over that period. The $30 million fine will now be paid to residential customers, on top of electricity credits already given by state and federal governments. All payments are planned to be applied to accounts over coming months. Title: Help Us Find Her, Sisters plea as police locate car of missing Belgian tourist. The search for missing Belgian tourist Celine Kremer has intensified after her car was found unattended in a car park near Philosopher Falls Track in Tasmania's remote west coast. The 31-year-old was last seen in Hobart on June 12, and police have received a concern for welfare report for her. Celine's sister, Amelia, has taken to social media to appeal to the public for any information that could help locate her sister. Tasmania Police have urged anyone who has been in the Philosopher Falls car park since June 12 to contact them. Ex-Audi boss convicted of fraud in Volkswagen diesel emissions scandal. Former Audi boss, Rupert Stadler, has been found guilty of fraud in connection with the Volkswagen diesel emissions scandal, becoming the highest-ranking executive convicted over cars that cheated on emissions tests. The Munich Regional Court sentenced Stadler to a suspended prison sentence of 21 months and a large fine. Stadler had pleaded guilty last month, admitting wrongdoing and regret for his failure to keep rigged cars off the market even after the scandal became public knowledge. The scandal cost Volkswagen more than $30 billion in fines and settlements and pushed the entire auto industry to shift to electric vehicles. Belarus welcomes Prigozhin as Putin praises troops for averting civil war. The founder of Russia's Wagner Group, Yevgeny Prigozhin, has arrived in Belarus, according to President Alexander Lukashenko. Meanwhile, Russian authorities have closed an investigation into the aborted armed rebellion led by Prigozhin and declined to press charges against his troops. The Federal Security Service said the case would not be pursued as activities had ceased. Over the weekend, the Kremlin pledged not to prosecute Prigozhin and his fighters after halting the revolt on Saturday, even though President Vladimir Putin had branded them traitors. Lukashenko said the mercenary leader and some of his troops were welcome in Belarus provided they stayed at their own expense. Australian troops might stay in Solomon Islands indefinitely, Deputy PM says. Deputy Prime Minister Richard Marles has suggested that Australian troops and police might stay in Solomon Islands beyond 2023. He made the announcement during his two-day visit to the country's capital, Honiara. This move could suggest a push for an enduring security presence in the Pacific island nation, as well as a contest between Australia and China for influence in the area. The Australian government had initially promised that the troops would only be deployed for a short-term period. However, with the Pacific Games happening in November, both governments agreed to keep some Australian police and soldiers until December 2023. Pistol found at Bondi Junction crime scene where drug kingpin was found dead. Detectives have found a potential murder weapon, a pistol left behind at one of the crime scenes, after the shooting death of convicted drug kingpin Alan Moradian. The 48-year-old was found dead inside a car in a Bondi Junction car park on Tuesday morning. Police believe it was a well-planned execution. A partially burnt-out luxury Porsche was found abandoned in nearby James Street with its doors flung open. Another car found torched at Zetland shortly after the shooting is also being forensically examined. Police are bracing for any possible backlash after the execution of the cocaine kingpin. Wagner fighter charged with murder in Russia. A convicted murderer who fought for Russia's Wagner private military contractor in Ukraine has been charged with stabbing an elderly woman to death in Russia just 10 days after returning from the war. Ivan Rosimohin, who was convicted of murder and freed after joining Wagner, was reportedly carrying a pitchfork and threatening to kill people when he returned to his village. This is not an isolated case, as at least 7 other convicts recruited by Wagner have been linked to violent crimes. The group's leader, Yevgeny Prigozhin, claimed to have recruited 50,000 convicts for Ukraine. Ain.